Hello and welcome to 4 Sevens, a podcast hosted by Alex Box from mathsplay.org and Marissa Cashmore from Motivating All Maths Learners to Succeed. 4 Sevens is a 7-part series exploring and sharing different ways to learn maths through play.
The International Day of Maths is a global celebration of mathematics that falls on the 14th of March. In 2024, the theme will be Playing with Maths, and so we thought what better way to support this important theme by bringing together a range of maths teaching and learning professionals to share and discuss playful, positive and powerful ways to engage and connect with mathematics.
We hope that, when listening, you find the conversations valuable as we endeavour to inspire you with a range of stories, perspectives and many practical ways to explore and play with maths.
Before we get stuck into the episode, we'd like to acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the traditional owners of the lands on which this podcast was created and is being listened to. We pay respect to elders past and present and recognise the contributions of all First Nations peoples to the land we live, learn and play on.
In this episode, we chat with Andrew Lorimer-Derham about games, puzzles and intentional fun. Andrew shared where he gets his fabulous ideas, the importance of learning through games, making mistakes, and some sporting analogies. We would like to thank Andrew for taking time out of his incredibly full schedule to play forward his thoughts, stories, and ideas.
Andrew Lorimer-Derham is one of those people who appears to breathe in oxygen and breathe out innovative ideas. And when those ideas are pursued, his passion and intention behind those projects really is, I think, helping to make our world a better place. He's well known and respected in the maths community, and both Marissa and I are delighted that you've been able to fit us into your undoubtedly busy schedule as director of Think Square, where you spend a lot of your time running student workshops and staff PD around the idea of intentional fun, which we're looking forward to diving into what that means. First of all, maybe just to start off the conversation, Andrew, where do you get all of this seemingly endless energy from to pursue all of these cool ideas that you have and bring them to schools and kids and others?
I think ideas have always come naturally for me. They've been something that I wanted to pursue from childhood, and probably started with ideas around saving money. So our family, I don't think we were poor, but I think we, my parents definitely did a good job pretending. So we never got brand clothes. We never got to, eat out very much. So I would take great pleasure in, getting good value for money and buffets and things like that. So we're always very creative with how we were saving money. It might have been stacking these lolly cups in Target, the ones you used to grab, and they'd sell the lolly cups, but instead of per gram, they used to charge per cup. And so me and my brother, he was a bit cuter than me, so I'd send him to the counter with the money. We would fill them and you'd pack them as hard as you could. But as we got to the top, we'd stack jubes around the outside of the cup, and then we'd stack lollipop sticks into the jubes to build a little fence at the top of the cup and make it bigger. And then anyway, he'd go to the counter to try to pay, and the lady's like, "Oh, you're supposed to fit a lid on that." But he was way cuter than me, so he got away with it, and we got 2 cups worth of lollies when we poured them out at home. So it started probably there. And then board games and puzzle books. My mum gave me, access to those growing up. I think that really helped. Like, it stimulated my imagination because you could see these things where you're buying and selling properties or whatever it might have been, Monopoly. And then I started trying to make my own as a young kid. And then from there, it's kind of never left me. Like 15 years later, went full circle and actually, produced a physical product. So, it's always been something that I've done. And I guess now I'm in a position to do it and be supported. So, yeah.
You've never really stopped doing what you loved doing as a kid.
Yeah. No,
Turn that into a business.
Yeah, as a kid, like I was making a board game when I was 14, and I was going around to friends' houses because, again, my family, I don't know if we could afford it. We just chose not to buy Microsoft Word and Excel. So I had to go around to their house to use Excel to make these board games because, you needed that tool to put things in squares and things like that. And they'd always tease me about it. And I'm like, yeah, well, when my board game goes into business, you're not getting any of the money. And sadly, that board game never went anywhere, and they tease me about it still. But so I was doing that, and I was making T-shirts as well, like funny T-shirts, just like slogans and things on T-shirts, because I kind of like words, like wordplay and things like that, as well as number play. So one of my ideas actually is the non-maths one is for English teachers, you put the lit in literacy. So I was like, I haven't pursued that one yet, but that's, I've always had these ideas bubbling. And anyway, 15 years later for that too, and there's a maths clothing line that I guess it was a dream as a child that now I can do because no one can stop me.
Yeah, which I'm wearing one of the T-shirts, which if you read it in the Mirror, it's Mirrogram's the name of the Mirrogram.org, and charities is what you, because I think some of the proceeds go to a charity or something or other.
Yeah, I've been in a few projects. So again, wordplay and puns like charity and generosity and, anything that ends in T you could put in there.
And always been a problem solver.
Yeah,
with the lollies.
Yes, yeah. And I guess the problem that that brings us together is the problem of people hating maths. And it's a big problem, and that's a hard problem to solve. It's going to take way more than my crazy ideas to try to fix. And there's teachers with boots on the ground. There's all sorts of parties that are involved that need to, share in what you're doing so that we can solve this problem because it's big.
Yeah.
So Marissa and I had a really good discussion the other night after a long day of school, for Marissa at least, about our own journeys and our own repaired relationships with maths, repaired through teaching opportunities. We both had that roller coaster, or at least I think of my own experience as a roller coaster where I was sort of bubbling along in primary school, and then maybe year 3, year 4, the frustration of this idea that maths is all about knowing the answer and knowing it fast, and there's that competitive element. It's interesting for us to think about where people's love of mathematics comes from. What's kind of led you down this path of really sharing your love of maths in so many creative ways that seems to be reaching kids? And what's this idea of intentional fun?
Yeah, so I guess I almost want to apologise because I was like sort of a successful quote-unquote product of that fast, quick thing for a time. Like that was something that was celebrated when I went through, and I was a beneficiary of that because I was fast at that. I knew my times tables in grade 3, and we had this little chart, and you'd go, the teacher would give you the sum, and then you'd have to answer it quickly, and if you beat the person, you'd go up on the ladder. And I remember being really proud one day. Because I was at the top, I got knocked down to the bottom so that I could have some goes, and I beat every single person in the class and got back to the top in the one thing. And so that was celebrated for me. But then that school also provided opportunities to be creative and solve tricky problems, so something engaged me. And then we moved rurally. Like my dad got a job as a principal out in the country, and the school didn't have teachers that was competent with their math skills, and they just didn't know what to do with me. So for me, it was like my frustrations were different to yours. They were boredom, worksheets, bigger numbers, like busy work. And so for me, I disengaged from that. But the thing that I've always loved across multiple subjects just in life in general is creativity. And I think maths is a creative endeavour, and that's why I love it. So the number skills are all just tools that I can use creativity to build something with. But I think often we celebrate those things, the quickness and the memorisation and following a process, as an end in and of themselves. And that's where it's so damaging for people like yourselves going through. It's like, if I wasn't quick enough or if I haven't memorised that really well, then people will see me as bad at maths, and that's hugely problematic. Creativity was why I'm attracted to it, I guess. And then I want to bring that out in what I'm sharing with kids. So like give them the opportunity to build those skills that they need, but then to do it in a creative way where they're actually able to take risks and not feel anxious and able to enjoy and relax as they're doing it, because they're not focused on, getting it right or getting it fast. And I think you asked about intentional fun. So the idea is sometimes we have fun without intention. So fun without intention would be like playing a video on a Wednesday afternoon just to get through. And, sometimes that's fine and appropriate, but there's no intention behind that. And so intentional fun for me is I want it to intentionally be fun, but also want the fun to be intentional. So I kind of start with a content area or concept that I want kids to be practicing over again or thinking about or using the mathematical skills to dive into. And so I start there and then design an experience that I know kids will enjoy, engage with, and I know that they'll be doing something equivalent on a textbook or worksheet or something, but also the depth of thinking and the creativity embedded into it. So that's sort of where it starts, and I'm happy to give some examples if that would be helpful.
Great.
One of them's called MathemaTic-Tac-Toe. It's probably my favourite one because it's just so simple to explain, and and the level, you don't need a huge level of maths to engage in it. So the low floor for this activity is being able to add to 15. So if a kid can add to 15, 3 numbers to 15, they're pretty good to start this game. And so the idea is, one day I was 3 a.m. as the ideas come and you can't stop them. I thought I'm going to just reinvent tic-tac-toe because it's a pretty boring game that should always end in a draw. If you've got 2 players thinking through each move, nothing should happen except for a draw every single time. I'm like, I'm a bit competitive, so that wasn't satisfying for me. So I decided, we want to have a grid and we want there to be 2 opposing roles so that there will always be a winner and someone who doesn't win. And so the 2 roles are attacker, whose job is to get 15 in any row, column or diagonal. So if any 3 numbers in a row add to 15, the attacker wins the game. And then the defender's job is to stop that from happening. So if all 9 numbers end up in that grid and none of the rows, columns or diagonals add to 15, then the game ends and the defender wins. And at its simplest, it's just adding to 15, but at its most complex, like it's taken me and a mate months to code and make all the if-then statements to get a robot that people can play against, which we'll put in the show notes as well for people to enjoy. But I've seen, kids in grade 2 play this game all the way through kids in year 12, year 10, and the way that they have to think about it, the way that they're developing strategy, thinking about what their opponent's going to do, talking out loud about what choices they're making and why they're making them. So, the kids that need the skills built to add to 15, they're getting that practice again and again to do that. But the kids who need something more are also getting an opportunity to shine in that. So that's one example of something that I would say is intentional fun. And we'll put the worksheet up of, a game compared to a worksheet and how much maths is in both and how the time it would take to do both. So that's, there's one example there.
I think all 3 of us have chatted about how not all maths games are created equal. I mean, that's obviously true, but just this idea that not all games that are maths games are actually fun. So therefore, there can't be intentional fun if they're not fun, right? Because the fun bit's missing.
Yes.
So it feels like you've hit upon a gem or something. I think when there's one that just keeps hooking you in again and again,
and all kids can access it.
Yeah, all kids can access it, gain something from it, be challenged from it. Yeah. There seems to be a little bit of a question of if the kids are having fun in maths, how can they be learning anything? Do you find that, Marissa?
Absolutely, yeah. But I sort of flip that question and go, well, how can the kids be learning if they're not having fun? Yeah. Yep.
It's an interesting one because I love that, that's your response. And then there's also companies out there like games and things that are quote unquote making maths fun, which is actually subtly implying that maths isn't fun in and of itself. So like I liken it to pouring sauce on my daughter's food. Like she loves sauce. If I put sauce on anything, she'll eat the thing that's covered in sauce. But I'm subtly implying that the thing is no good and it needs sauce. And so sometimes I think we do that with maths. Like, and a lot of teachers, the ones that maybe have become cynical about games, have seen these things where, a kid is playing an online game and they've got to fight this monster, but for some reason they've got to answer 8 times 5 to shoot an arrow at this thing, and it's kind of plastered on like flashy graphics and other things that are saying this is basically a boring worksheet question. It's not open. It's not going to challenge you. You either know how to follow the process or you don't. And we're going to put this thing on top of it and we'll call it a game. And teachers are sort of reactive to that, and which is fair enough. But then there are, like you said, there's games where kids are voluntarily going to spend their own time at lunchtime or recess playing it. And you can see what's happening if you're as a teacher, an expert teacher walks past and asks the questions, what's happening in your head right now? What are you doing? Tell me about your choices. There's a lot of thinking going on there, and that's voluntary. And so I think, yes, some teachers have had negative experiences of games, some have had positive, and I guess it's being able to demonstrate more and more how drawing it out, like this is what's happening when people have this experience, and even giving them experiences for themselves. So that's something that I love to do, is give teachers an experience of a game. And when they say, oh, my brain hurts, I can't think, it's like, okay, so you are using your brain. Like there's actually intention behind this. Something's happening mathematically. And for me, fun. just across all areas of my life. I remember playing basketball. I didn't grow till I didn't get my first underarm hair till, I don't know, year 10 or maybe year 11. I was in the front of the photo. So I'm 6'2" now, but I was in the front of the school photos, and that's where they put all the short kids. And so when I played basketball in those seasons where I was the smallest and I wasn't, getting passed to as much or whatever, I wasn't having fun. And I was just so anxious about every choice that I made. Every time I got the ball, if I didn't stuff it up, I'm like, oh, good, I didn't mess it up. And if I got some points, it wasn't so much like, oh, good, I'm contributing to the team. It's like, well, now people can't bag me out because at least I did something. And I feel like, maybe for yourselves in a maths class, you're just constantly on edge thinking about that. And how can you thrive as a learner in that environment? How can any learner thrive if they're constantly just worried about the mistakes that they're about to make or could make or might make?
Yeah.
And I think fun just takes away that anxiety.
We need to bottle up a little bit of Andrew and get a little bit of you into every classroom by the sound of it. Have you got a solution for that?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's the teachers that are going to make the difference. Like I can help provide some things, but teachers with boots on the ground and relationships and understand the context they're in and the families they work with, they're honestly the difference makers. And sometimes I lament doing what I do because I don't get to have that relationship with kids where I get to see growth over time. I come in, run a cool activity, and that's all well and good, but what difference does it make? I don't know. Hopefully it makes a difference to the teacher who goes on and then makes a difference themselves, because teachers are where it's at. So I'd love to maybe get into the university system or something before people get out, so that more people can have a vision of maths that's holistic and joyful and creative. So one day, maybe.
Reignite their passion.
The International Day of Maths is coming up on March 14, 2024, and we're really excited because the theme is playing with maths, and I think it's just going to be a great opportunity to share different ways of playing with maths, and games being just one and puzzles being another, and using storybooks to step into mathematical worlds and engage in maths, and perhaps reflecting on what it is that makes these experiences playful, but also opportunities to really learn. And in preparation for that, what do you define as a maths game? And how is it different to a puzzle? Like, do you have to have winners and losers? And
games can certainly be collaborative, and designed quite a few of those where, you're playing against a boss or something that's automated, and so it's working in a mathematical way that and so you're strategizing against that. There might be aliens, forming on a times table grid, the grids you put on the back of your books. Most textbooks have, or workbooks have them in there, and so you can use the things around the outside to multiply and teleport to different places, and these aliens are going to chase you. So that it can be, I think a game, it's quite hard to define, because being playful is a game like. So for me, I went to the fridge the other day, so this is sort of how I see the world, and I picked up the packet of eggs and I just about dropped them because my wife had been taking the eggs from one side of the egg carton and left them all on the other. I'm like, that's not mathematically, that's terrible. Like, this is not balanced. And so I'm like, my wife, you're insane, Lisa. What are you doing? And so, me being a nerd, I sat down and I'm like, all right, what if there were 7 eggs in a carton? Like, what is the best way to stack them to make them the most balanced? And out comes a mathematical activity where you just, any number of eggs, you've got to put them in the best way to keep it the most balanced. So when you pick up the carton, you're least likely to drop it. And to me, it's not really a game because there's no opponent, but it's a game in that it's playful, it's fun, and you can just enjoy it as much as you like and then leave it. And, for me, it's finding every combination possible. For other people, it might be 1 or 2 things. And going back just to before, both of you were saying, just not being the best or the most expert. I think there's some real great things about that, in that when you're running a maths talk, the time that you give people to think is enough, whereas the brilliant maths professor or someone who's really quick at maths might just go, oh, well, I expect you to get it, and not give the kids the time that they need. And then for you too, both of you would be genuinely surprised, because you haven't got your head around every possible answer and combination. When a kid comes up with a strategy, it's not something that you can actually, you're not faking surprise or genuine appreciation for a strategy, because you're like, this is new to me. Like, how cool is that? And kids love that when they can show their teacher something that they didn't know. I mean, that makes them feel $1 million. So I think there's some some wonderful things that come from not being the expert and even sometimes purposely making mistakes. And it's like it takes a bit of setting ego aside to give kids agency, first of all, but then second of all, to maybe even purposely make a mistake so that the kids can pick up on it. And I know there's teachers out there that have done that and would recommend doing that. They're like, oh, is my ego, is my ego going to cope with that?
Yeah.
But anyway, it seems like you two have less ego than me, so good on you. But
So would you find that difficult to fake a mistake, Andrew?
I've done it once or twice, but it depends on the context. Like losing to my brother in a game of tennis, no chance. Like I thought about that one day. I'm like, could I lose to my brother in a game of tennis to make him feel a bit better? And I was just like, nah, I couldn't do it because our relationship was really competitive, and we were probably like you and your brother. And if you could have beat your brother in something, you would have probably taken the chance with both hands. And so, being aware about that, about yourself is like, no, and there's contexts that I'm more comfortable. So, if I'm seen as a maths expert or Frisbee was something I played a lot, like I'm happy to involve people in the game, not score any goals myself, but just get people involved in an opportunity. I think as a teacher, I need to have the maturity to step back and go, it's not about me, it's actually about the kids. And so I'll be more happy to set it aside in a context where it's like that. But in family, no chance.
Yeah, context matters.
I think if I was really grown up, I could do it in all areas of my life, but not yet.
That's really funny. I suppose you could argue that by being unbeatable, you're really challenging. Is that offering an opportunity to someone else in the situation?
Yeah, and definitely context again. Those kids, and you'd know them, the ones that think they're the best. They walk around in the maths class or the PE class. I was a PE teacher as well. Just I'm great, and putting those kids back in their place. That there is a time and a place for that as a teacher. Like the kid that is trying to hog the ball and they're playing in the basketball team. Like I'll block them, I'll reject them, and I'll make sure I say, you should have passed it to so and so because I actually want them to see that it's about more than them. But then again, you just got to check yourself there how hard you go and that. But you would know. I mean, you've done it probably in your own teaching practices. That kid that's just like, I'll celebrate someone else today because you get celebrated all the time.
But how good is it when you do celebrate that student that does take extra long to solve problems, and they're the ones that are highlighted and celebrated in front of the looks on their faces. I had it just the other day with I teach Prep 1 now, so I've gone from grade 5 all the way down to Prep 1, and I'm loving it. But just one student's just really, really shy, and she was celebrated the other day, and just the look on her face, she just lit up, and they're the moments that you go, oh.
Actually, that makes me think of a question that I did have and I jotted down earlier. Games in prep in year 1, do they work well, or are they sort of too young to kind of...
No, 100%. Yeah. They love games.
Yeah. I mean, I guess
they
born
are more
to play, right? It makes sense. But I just wondered in terms of trusting that they will learn maths through games. Is that something that you feel or have seen to work? Because I'm just thinking back to a conversation I was listening to the other day from another person who creates games, Dan Finkel, and he was talking about how a third grade teacher, so this is middle school, came along to a workshop and learned some games and took one of the games and was quite sceptical about using games to teach maths concepts, but took one back to her school, ran the game, and came back again the next month to the training and said, well, I ran the game and I learned that about half the kids in my class don't know how to add. But she learned it because they were in that state of play where there was this intrinsic motivation to actually add numbers. So she would see and hear children asking each other how to do this. But I do wonder, I guess, about how you can start young with success and what the potential challenges are that get in the way of doing that.
I think, and I think this is for any year level, not just Prep 1, but I think the importance of introducing gameplay in game is having those moments where you stop and you talk about what's been successful and what's not working and what strategies are you using to solve the problems within the game. And I think it's really important to play the game more than once. So I use games as warm-ups a lot, and I sort of play that game over the space of a whole week. So it's every day. And because I always believe that the kids, especially a new game, they're only learning the rules for the first couple of days and then the maths will start. after that, but then it needs to be scaffolded by you a little bit. So we use Many Possibilities a lot, which is a game I created a while ago, which I want to talk to you about, Andrew, seeing how we can turn it from a laminating game into a real game. And that's a accumulated total type game. So it's addition based, and teaches the kids trust account and multiple different skills. But when the kids first started playing that, which they've got the picture cards out on the table, and then they've got their target number, such as 17. I remember one student in particular went from just going, okay, there's a 10 here. I found a 7. All right, that works. Next round, because you keep playing until all the cards are gone. Next time it came around to him, he couldn't find a 10 and a 7. So he sort of gave up. But then after playing it multiple times, because he started to realise that the aim of the game is to collect the most cards, he then realised we can partition the number 17 even further, and he started going 1, another 1, 2, 2 there, 4, and counting them to get the most cards. So that's teaching and partitioning really well. And that's when I'd probably stop and then go, oh, this student's got this many ways to make 17. Let's write this up as a number sentence. Who's got another way to make 17? And there's a whole lesson there for you.
Yeah, so just to clarify, the aim of that game is to create the target number, 17, using the different cards that...
Yes.
Yeah. And then essentially looking at there are different ways of making that, and you're adding and you're partitioning, and I guess you're doing some supertising by default as well.
Yes, yeah, because they're based on supertising the cards.
Yeah.
So, and more. But trust account too.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. But we've played multiple games. Like I was just thinking, you spoke about MathemaTic-Tac-Toe. I remember thinking about how I've used that in every year level except for Prep 1. And while you were talking about it, I thought, I wonder how I could use that, because I do have kids in my year level that can add beyond 10. So I thought, I'm going to see if I can play that and see how they go with it.
And that's the thing that I was thinking about immediately with the younger year levels. It's kind of like trying to play basketball. You need some level of skill. Like you need to be able to catch the ball. You probably need to be able to dribble the ball. Otherwise, it's just going to be a mess. And so as teachers, you're the experts in terms of what skills have your students obtained. And that'll become clear as you play the game anyway. If it just breaks down because no one can catch the ball, then you have to modify the game. You make the rings lower, you make the ball soft, you make it bigger. You have to adjust the things to give kids access to that game, because you're right, if kids don't even understand numbers, adding to 15 is going to be pretty tricky, and you might get 1 or 2 kids in the class that do it, but the rest might not. So it's the teachers that are expert about figuring out where that is. But once they've obtained the skills, then the games are wonderful.
Is there a danger of pitching a game too high? Is that a common problem, do you think?
I think it can be. Yeah, you might try a game and they've learnt the rules, but the maths isn't happening. But that's okay.
You just adjust, like Andrew was saying. Yeah. I think I've done that with Secret Number, guess my number, and I had a huge range of like 1 to 50 for prep kids. It was just a disaster.
Yeah. Well, I tried doing the 4 in a row on a 120 chart with no numbers on it. So I did try that with preps and ones, and it was a great challenge for my higher order thinkers, but it was not accessible at all. But there's really good ways to differentiate that. So it meant that some kids needed numbers there, some kids only needed the 0 and the 120, and other kids needed a full 120 chart next to them with the blank one, and then others were fine without it. So. Yeah,
and I've definitely made my share of mistakes at overpitching. Like that's probably my bent, is because I've come from not being challenged enough. I'll overdo it, and so I remember doing a percentage game where you're kind of banking money, stealing money from other people, and the percentages kids just couldn't work with, like they were too tricky. And so it's a pretty simple adjustment. Just make the percentages easier, like make it 50%, make it 25%, and so but I need to have. Not try to keep pushing like this is my idea and it's going to work. It's just like, no, okay, it's not working. And even that, experimenting with that and owning it with the kids, saying, oh yeah, I made the mistake. I made this wrong. This was my fault. Just allows them to see, oh, hey, my teacher's made a mistake. It's okay. And that's part of making games. I reckon you can't know, like sometimes I know, oh, this will be great, like this is just going to work. But most of the time it's like I've got to test it and see how people respond to it, see what year levels, it's appropriate. Because, you might go into a year 7 class in the city at a high-performing school and versus one in a country in a lower-performing school. And it's vastly different. Like you think, oh, those kids got it, those kids should get it too. It's like, no, you're in a different context now. There's different skills.
Yeah.
I need to change what I'm doing to suit.
It's that productive part of your struggle, isn't it? Productive struggle doesn't mean just struggle on your left. It's productive struggle.
And we're the ones that can ensure that's productive rather than unproductive. Because if it's just too far beyond, they'll start throwing paper and calling each other names.
I have just been thinking about, Marissa, when you reminded us of tic-tac-toe, which Andrew described, and it got me thinking about those games that are like traditional games that we know, like tic-tac-toe or noughts and crosses, and then adapting it to become more mathematical. Because I had an experience last year in a Prep 1 class where I was trialling some lessons and I wanted to get the kids working independently. And so one of the activities that I tested with them while I was working with a small group was to teach dots and boxes, or paddocks, I think it's also known.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And they had a 3x3 board, so that was four rows of 4 dots, and they also had a 4x4 box board. And it was really interesting to me because I grew up with that game. I remember playing that game in the back of the car on the long trips to Sydney, which I know not every family has long trips from Melbourne to Sydney, but it was a really important part of my childhood. And I guess I just assumed that they would know how to play, or at least some of the kids would. But it was a completely new game for every child in the class. And it got me wondering about whether some of those integral games that were just a part of our life growing up are getting a bit lost. For me, it was one that I would go back to again and again. Every car trip, we'd play that same game. What is it about that game that made it a go-to game? And therefore, if you can create a mathematical variation, you've sort of got that in of, this is like the game I played growing up. And that makes me think of the examples that you've created, Andrew, of mathematical snakes and ladders is one that I haven't actually played yet, but I've shared it with a few people, and a mathematician friend actually said, oh yeah, that's a really easy fix to make that game more interesting and strategic. But I just wondered if you had any comment on those classic games. I think a lot of yours have been inspired by classic games and puzzles. Yeah,
there's definitely a few. Just on that, though, I remember in year 12, like I said, I was bored and a bit slack. I remember I had access to the staff photocopier, like I was on the school leadership or whatever. And I remember drawing on a page like a 20 by 20 dots grid, like 400 paddocks grid, and photocopying off reams of paper so I could play that in class in English. And I did. I'd take because that was the most annoying thing about paddocks, was drawing all the dots to start with. So I got access to the photocopier, made a whole bunch of copies for me and my friends, and we'd play it during year 12 English. So I love that game. And you got me thinking, I've just recently made a version of that where it's about area and perimeter of shapes. But as you were talking, I was thinking of an area version of paddocks, which I will go home today, probably have a crack at, send you, and we can put it in the show notes. I'll just have a crack at making an area version, because I think that's really possible. So I love picking classic games, because I think the barrier of the rules or people being familiar with it is gone, and it's just like, how's this mathematical spin going to change it? But I was surprised. I've been to a few schools now where students didn't know about snakes and ladders. Like they didn't know what happened if you landed on a snake, or what happened. And so I actually had to go back and explicitly teach, this is what happens. It's pretty simple. But I was genuinely surprised that people didn't know about that one. The other one that I like to adjust is Guess Who. So I've made one called Guess the Number. Again, it's like a guessing game, but most guessing number games just result in a whole bunch of higher, lower than questions. And so the adaptation for this is just, if you use a type of question, it can't be used again. So if I ask you, we're playing with the numbers 1 to 20, and I say, is your number greater than 10? All greater than or less than questions are banned for the rest of the game. So now we have to get creative, which, I've had a student say to me, well, on their turn, they were like, if I subtract 10 from the number, your secret number, will the result be negative? I'm like, genius, what a legend. And then, if I ask you an even question, even odd, they're banned now, and you have to ask a question in a clever way. Is it a multiple of 2? Is it
a square number?
Does it end in a 0, or whatever? And so it's fascinating, and it develops a mathematical language and gets kids thinking. And yeah, it's a really simple thing. Like everyone's played some sort of guessing game, I think, and most people would be familiar with Guess Who. So yeah, I love reimagining the classics to make them more thinking, more choice.
Yeah.
Sudo-Clue is a favourite in my family, and I had the pleasure of being in a household with a family recently, a year 3 and year 6 student and parents. And apparently after I left, because we did a Sudo-Clue puzzle together, which is one of the games in your suite, which we can link to because there's like a free daily puzzle, I think, or a few free puzzles. And I got an email the next day saying, thank you for coming in and running the session. Appreciate the ideas and resources. And our grade 6 child has spent the rest of the night, wanted to play Sudo-Clue till bedtime, and so I was like, oh, winner, Thank you, Andrew. But yeah, I am becoming a bit puzzle obsessive.
Yeah. And you're not the only one. There's so many people, that email me at midnight, whatever, I've got it, or they go home and they're just trying stuff for hours. Like, I've had people say to me, their husband has banned them from putting the maths puzzles on the coffee table because they're just obsessing about it, like they've had to put it away in the cupboard. And I'm that person. There's many of us out there that, maths is a recreational activity, and there's currently one that I'm doing about a 7-11. It's in a maths book called "Can You Solve My Problems" by Alex Bellos, and because I've spent hours on it already, I'm still not there, and it won't be that. I'll get there eventually, and I think that's something I also enjoy about it. It's just I think it develops persistence. Like, I know that my efforts will make a difference, and that's really what a growth mindset is. If you truly believe that if you put in the effort, you'll get the result eventually. And I don't care if it takes me ages. I'll just keep doing it anyway because I enjoy it. And so I'd love for more people to have that experience too.
Well, I'm feeling very full and satiated from this discussion. I've got lots of things to think about, and I know that we've all got some links to dig out and add to the show notes. I wondered if, before we finish up, whether anyone feels like responding to something on our dessert menu.
It might be the favourite ways to play, and it's an approach to life, I think, that goes outside of just maths. But just asking yourself, I wonder if, or what would happen if. And I ask myself that question all the time, and that leads me down many rabbit holes, and none of them have any real practical use, but then often they do in the end. Like, I wonder if these pieces will fit on this board. I wonder if I can make these cards add to this number in this way. Like, it's a joy for me, the hours that I spend on it. And sometimes at the end of it, you end up with a puzzle that's really cool. Sometimes you just enjoy yourself. But I wonder if I've asked that question a lot. That's a question that runs through my brain. So if you can ask that, I think it'll lead you to some unexpected and really cool places.
I love it. Marissa, you did one the other day, but you did mention it was a bit hard to pick. So I don't know if you feel like doing another.
Well, I feel like I could find one from favourite ways to play.
Yeah.
And it's probably the storytelling. So most people that listen to my webinars and my workshops and head to my website know me for using picture storybooks, but I also love actually just creating stories in my maths classes. So, and I feel like Maths 300 has really helped me with that, because there's a lot of really beautiful, rich tasks that I connect with, that I can go, oh, I've got a really good story that goes with that. So the 4-arm shape one, I always use the story that the principal wants us to create a new garden in the school. They want a tile that's featured in the middle, but then paths coming off each edge of the tile. If we just have one stepping stone, how many tiles altogether will we need? We need 2. How many will we have altogether? But using the story hook of and making them believe that the story's true, I think is a really good way to get the kids engaged. And and I'm always trying to create new stories. So if a new rich task comes along, I'm always trying to find a new way to create a hook for that through storytelling.
Thanks for being here. Oh gosh, I've got so much to think about, and I'm probably going to go home and play Sudo-Clue now, or maybe try and make my own. I don't know if that's possible, but
definitely possible. I'll put another link in the show notes for that. People can make their own. Before I go, I do want to ask what 4 sevens is. Am I allowed to ask that
yeah.
question?
So
Yeah.
actually, maybe we can sign off with how you would work out 4 sevens. What's your go-to strategy if you had to?
Depends what I'm trying to do with the 4 sevens. Am I building a tower? Am I making them in a box? I guess my immediate thought is just 28, but then there could be about weeks or something. The 7 can represent different things, so I'd have to think about it a bit more to give you any definitive answer. But
now, you mentioned that 4 sevens is 28. How did you get to that answer?
Oh, well, for me, it's probably just a rote learn thing now. Like it's within that times tables 1 to 10, and they're ones that I know off by heart. So yeah, it's probably just doing that. If I was to break it down and I didn't know it, I'd probably be able to double 7. 2 sevens is 14, and then 4 sevens is twice as big as that, so 28. But I don't need to do that for that particular sum.
Because it's a known fact for you.
Yeah, it's a known fact.
All right. Was there anything anyone wanted to put out there into the ether before we sign off?
Was there any games you would like to share to our listeners right now that we?
Yeah, no, I'm really keen to start this mathematical paddocks game because it's going to be a game about perimeter and area. Basically, I can describe to you what I'm thinking now, as Alex said it. So let's just imagine a 5x5 grid of dots, or 6x6, whatever number you like. And if you're not familiar with paddocks, players take turns in drawing a line between 2 dots in a north, south, east, or west direction. And usually, if you create a box that's a one by one, you'll capture that space, and that's the only space you can capture. But I'm wondering. Well, if you could create a square or a rectangle that was a 2x1 or a 3x1, and you could capture that entire space with not filling in the middle bits, but if you could create an enclosed shape and capture that area, write Alex on that area, and the player with the most area wins the game. And I've got a similar game where you roll dice and create rectangles based on the perimeter or the area. But this one is just 1 by 1. You just take a turn at drawing the things, and you could play it with 2 players, with 3 players. You could play it with triangles. It wouldn't have to be limited to that. And so that would start the conversation around area and how you calculate area and what's the best strategy and how can you force someone to do what they don't want to do to give you a box rather than the little 1 by 1 might give you a 3 by 1 or a 3 by 3. So we'll
experiment. Because I've played the multiplication toss version. It's my go-to for multiplication.
Yeah, where you're blocking out area in one go.
Yeah, but it's not with the dots. It's with a grid.
Yes. I've seen that one.
That's, I think, might be Diceman that.
Yeah, I've seen it on Math for Love. I think it's block out as well. Or there's various examples. Yeah.
So the one that I've created, it's similar to that, but you get a choice. So you roll the dice, and the simplest, it'll be the area, but more complex, it'll be the perimeter. And then you have to make a shape with that perimeter. So you've got an answer of this is what the perimeter is. Now you're going to make a shape. And the cool thing about perimeter is you've got a lot of flexibility to create a lot of shapes. And some shapes are better than others. So if you imagine, a perimeter of 12, you could have a 5 by 1 rectangle, which only captures 5 spaces. Or you could make a 3 by 3, which, gets you 9 spaces. And then the long straight piece gives you an opportunity to block people off and make a fence and do a bit of a Donald Trump and try to build a wall or something. And but the other shape has a higher amount of area, which is actually the overall goal in the game is to capture the most space. And so you get some agency around what you create, which I think adds another layer of thinking to that again. And it's like Blockers, you've got to connect your shapes to ones that you've already placed on the board. And anyway, we can put that in the show notes. People are going to get a games bundle at the end of this.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of 4 Sevens. To access any of the resources mentioned in this episode, you can find links to these in the show notes. If you know someone you think would be interested in this episode, please remember to play it forward to them.
4 Sevens is produced by Maths Play and is a partnership project between Maths Play and motivating all maths learners to succeed. If you'd like to send us a message, you can do so at mathsplay.org/podcast.